Hey, Noah Bennett, founder, Against the Tide Media here, and I know it's been a while. Apparently God has decided to take my life in other directions, but in my minor absence, the Against the Tide Media team has grown significantly. Therefore, we can release more content more often. And before we get into the video, if you like Against the Tide Media's content and want more people to see it, could you please do me a big favor? Hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell. Because when YouTube sees the algorithms going up on Against the Tide Media's channel, that's truly how quality faith-based content is going to get in front of the eyes of more people. And while on that topic, did you know that Against the Tide is going into production for a pilot that we're hoping to turn into a multi-season series? Introducing Anti. The concept is inspired by the Book of Revelation and almost takes an anti-hero approach on the character of the Antichrist and asks the question, is anyone really beyond the point of God's redemption? To find out more about that project, visit antiseries.com. We're currently having a fundraiser and have to raise $74,877 before September 28th. If you could please look into that and possibly support us, that would mean so much to us. But anyway, enough self-promotion. On with the show.
Fans of Against the Tide Media, we are so excited today with over nearly 365 million views. The chosen, we would say, Timothy Ratajczak, who is our guest host along with me, we would say that this is possibly one of the most popular shows on it. That was horrible. Let me go back. This is why we bring Noah in. He fixes me.
Good.
Against Tide Media fans, we're so excited today. We have Dallas Jenkins, writer, director, and creator of The Chosen, which is nearing 365 million views. Thank you so much, Dallas, for being here today. We appreciate it. It's a privilege.
Oh, no, I love, I've watched so many of those interviews that you guys have done and other hosts have done. I feel like now there's more hosts on Against the Tide Media than there are guests. But I thought, you know what, let's go maybe to the OGs. And I told Noah, I said, I'd love to chat with Darren and Tim, if that's okay. If we can have two hosts, because I've loved both of you guys when you do interviews. All the hosts are great, but you guys were kind of the originals, and I thought it'd be fun to chat with you. Also, because I know you guys are also writers, and we've done some similar things, worked with similar people, so I thought it'd be fun to talk to you.
Yeah, and let me introduce Timothy Ratajczak, the co-host with me, one of the original Against the Tide Media. Like Dallas said, what do we have, Tim? Like 30 interview hosts now. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. So anyway, right out of the gate, I want to talk about some amazing cinematography that you did, Dallas, with your director of photography in season 2, episode 3, Matthew 4:24. You start with title sequence, and about 2:35 in, you have like a 16-minute sustained shot. It's absolutely amazing. And I think the fans would love to hear specifically, I mean, was that daunting? Were you going and thinking, Lord on high, can we get through this? Or how are you thinking to put that together? Because it's just an amazing shot.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So we have actually a YouTube video where we get into the details of it. There's a video called The 3 Miracles of the Chosen, or the 3 miracles that changed our lives, or something like that. And that's one of them, how that all happened. And then each episode of this season, I've done a kind of director's reaction where I take you through some of the details. So you can get more detail there, but one of the things I haven't shared too much of just was how we decided to do it. I remember when we were first talking through that episode and we're doing our location scout and our our prep work, where the whole crew kind of walks through each location that we're going to be filming in, and we talk about what's our general approach. And a lot of times it's things like, where's the power going to be set up? Because we're out in the middle of the field. So where are you going to set up the generator? And there's so many things that you talk about that have nothing to do with the art of it. And it's more about the technical side. So I'll usually have the leaders of the crew are all on this scout, and I kind of walk them through what the scene is, and they have their script, so they know a little bit of it. And I say, we'll probably be around here, and we'll probably be here. And I just give very general thoughts, and then usually they all nod, and then they talk amongst themselves for 15 minutes, and it's all nerd talk that I have nothing to say about. This is where we're going to be hanging things. This is where we're going to be plugging in. These are the equipment I'll need. It's usually the cinematographer's opportunity. In this case, he stepped in and said, what are ways we can make this more interesting? Because episode 3 of each season is the one that I write by myself. And it's usually just, most of it consists of very little plot, and it's people talking. And so, because I'm not great with plot, and I'm also not great with visuals. But I'm pretty good with people talking.
Jesus Loves the Little Children was awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So that was episode 3 of season 1. And it's most of it is people talking, and it's character stuff. Just, we're going to spend some time with the characters, and nothing really big is going to happen. And that's my specialty. So in this case, Akis Konstantakopoulos, who's our cinematographer, was saying, how do we make this interesting? And what if up until page 6, it was a oneer, where we didn't cut. I thought, that could be interesting, and here's how we could do that. And then he just kept pushing. And he's like, what if the whole thing was a oneer? And I'm like, well, we can't obviously do the evening shots connected to the morning shots all in one shot, because you can't predict how the sun's going to work. But he just kept pushing and pushing. And then once we decided, okay, let's go for it, then it becomes how do we pull it off? And then it becomes a totally different animal. Now you're actually, instead of just saying what we normally do, which is, here's where the actors are going to be, let's figure out how to film it. Now it's, here's how we're going to film it. Where do the actors need to be to make that work? And so this was one of the few cases where the process dictated the action. And that's very rare on The Chosen, because I'm very actor reliant and story reliant. In this case, it was the other way around. And it ended up, the reason that it worked and the reason that I was sold on it and believed in it was because we never want to do something artistic just for the sake of it. It needs to be organic to the story. In this case, we thought doing it in one shot will put you there. There's going to be this sense of urgency, this sense of immediacy, this sense of things are happening right now. In fact, the sun is going down as we're filming it. We're hearing in the background what's happening, all the healing. And there's this sense of real-time conversation. They're figuring things out as they talk, something you can't create any other way. And as people know who've seen the videos that we talk about it, it was the last take that we did that. All the takes before then didn't work for various reasons. We had one take left. We had 15 minutes before the sun completely went down below the trees, and that had to work, and it did. And it was one of the miracles that took place in the whole season.
I just want to ask a follow-up question at the risk of sounding like a film geek. Did you shoot any coverage just to be on the safe side?
We did not. Wow. We by the end of the day, we were saying, oh gosh, we thought what we were hoping for was we would get one good take during the day, and then we would wait until the sun was going down and we had that perfect light, and we would try one more, knowing we had a backup in case, because you can never predict the sun's going to be perfect. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. We're like, let's make sure we have one good take, and then at the end of the day, we'll try for one more, and that'll be the beautiful one if it works. And none of the takes we got during the day worked. And we did not have a plan on how to film it with alternate view, angles. We had gone all in. So I think we thought, if we don't get it today, we're going to be stuck and tomorrow we'll maybe have to do it a traditional route. But we didn't give ourselves too much of a backup plan. I mean, it was, so that last take of the day where it was the only way it was going to work, we had put ourselves in that situation and had no safety net. So there was one moment, I'll say this real quick. Sorry. There was one moment where by the end of the take, the the camera operator who was operating a 60-pound Steadicam was so exhausted, we could actually hear his breathing in the microphone. And the camera jolts a little bit, and we had to smooth that out a little bit in post-production. But otherwise we had no alternative.
Well, Dallas, I remember watching it, and I'm not kidding you. My wife, Galen, and I are sitting there watching it. And about 5 minutes in, I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking, this is the sustained or one-off. And then 10 minutes in, and complex character groups moving away from other groups where their dialogue dies on the vine behind the new dialogue. And I'm like, I looked at Galen, I go, this is one of the most complicated shots I've ever seen, not just film, whatever medium. But so, man, I love that shot. That is my favorite episode. Real quick, I love when we go up to where Mary Mother is talking about what was it like to give birth to Jesus. And that scene, I can't get through that without crying. It kills me every time. But anyway.
Yeah, it's one of those scenes where I think we set up a situation and it was sitting around the fire talking backstage as Jesus is doing all the healing of that. We're just going to create a scenario in which they can talk about anything. And what would come up? What would they ask? And they've got the mother of Jesus sitting there. I know what I would ask. And I thought, well, they're human beings like we are. So let's talk about it. And, giving her that opportunity to have a moment of just describing it without telling everything, but giving a little bit of the nuance of it was a really fun opportunity.
And you bring in some great comedy there too, because I love it when she says, "Oh, you don't want to hear about this," and they all go, "Yes." It's awesome.
Yeah. Humor. I mean, this is, I don't know if you were planning to talk about this or not, but I'll just briefly say humor is a huge factor in the show. We take it, this will sound weird. We take it very seriously. Like I intentionally am looking for opportunities to put in humor because A, it's humanizing, and B, it's a release valve for a drama. And so many of Jesus projects or Bible projects are so serious that we have to have these release valves just so that the dramatic moments actually carry more weight. And we put those humorous moments in the middle of dramatic moments. You'll see a lot of times in miracles, everyone's crying or there's this big moment and then Jesus says something snarky or one of the characters makes a joke comment and they all laugh. And it's kind of my dramatic reenactment of what happens at funerals. I don't know if how many funerals you've been to, but I'm sure some of the biggest laughs of your entire life happen at funerals or because your emotions are so close to the surface. And that's a key part of the show.
Yeah, I've noticed that it's the deceased doesn't usually laugh a whole lot, but nevertheless, you are correct.
That's why you're on this. That's why you're on this interview, Tim. You have those kinds of insights. Very, very important.
Actually, the truth of the matter is that watching that episode, it was like watching a ballet, and that's the only way I can describe it. It was like watching the dancers hitting their marks. It was very well done. So, I guess we're going to bounce back and forth here with questions. But Noah can edit this whatever way he likes. I want to talk to you about your career before The Chosen. I don't want anybody to get the idea that you just materialized out of thin air and that this is your first time at the rodeo. So let's go into the Wayback Machine and we'll go back to 2005 when you made a short film called Midnight Clear, starring Stephen Baldwin, who is probably my favorite Baldwin brother. And then a year later, you made it into a feature film also called Midnight Clear with pretty much the same cast. And for those people who don't know, the film is based on a short story that was written by your father, Jerry Jenkins, and along with Tim LaHaye, he wrote a series of books called Left Behind that some of you may be familiar with. I was wondering, was it always your intention to turn the short film into a feature, or did the opportunity just suddenly come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. My dad wrote a book that was a series of short stories, and one of the short stories always really spoke to me, and I thought it would make a good short film. It was the second thing I'd ever directed. I directed a short film before that called Cliché, which was, my dad and I for years have been saying, it'd be so funny to watch a movie or something that where every single line, every single character was a cliche. And so we did that. And that was where I started my directing career. I'd made a movie before that, but I'd produced it. And Midnight Clear was the second thing that I did as a director. And when it was done, I was really proud of it. It was unique. I still like it. But when I was looking for the first feature that I was going to do, I just thought there were more things to say. And so when I was doing the short, it was not intended to be a feature. But the short, again, it didn't sell much. I mean, it's not like it made money. Short films rarely, if ever, make money. But I was just really interested in the concept. Midnight Clear is about 5 different strangers who all on Christmas Eve are in varying degrees of loneliness and desperation. 2 of the characters are suicidal, and then how they blend together. And it was around the same time that the movie Crash was coming out. I don't remember the exact year, but I just really had a lot to say about Christmas and about loneliness and about people. I wasn't a very good filmmaker yet. And so I say yet, that might've sounded arrogant, but I know at the time I just wasn't very good. Certainly wasn't very good visually. So the film is very flat visually, and I had a great cinematographer, but I didn't utilize him properly. And so but when you go back and watch it, if you ever do, I think you can see seeds that are there that are interesting. I just wasn't very good at the time. But this is a very long answer to your question. But I just thought that I have things to say, and I think this cast is good, and I think there's an interesting setting here, and I think this could be kind of a sleeper. Back then, independent movies like that, kind of character dramas, oftentimes did well and got attention at Sundance. And I remember like Wes Anderson had recently done Bottle Rocket, which I loved. And there were movies like that, like these kind of low budget character pieces. And it was a good time for those kinds of movies. I just wasn't good enough to. I think Magnolia is a huge influence on me, and that was another one that was out in that neighborhood. So anyway, the movie almost got into Sundance. Like I remember I made the final cut, and then I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be it. And it didn't quite make it. And the movie never did great. It got picked up by Lionsgate, which is an awesome opportunity, but it just didn't do a ton. But yeah, that was the first feature film that I ever directed.
Now, for the people who haven't seen it, Midnight Clear is a Christmas movie, albeit a melancholy one.
Yes.
About some people who get lonely and depressed around the Christmas holidays, which ironically is supposed to be a time of joy and togetherness. I'm not saying that the movie doesn't have a happy ending. Go and see it for yourself. It's a great movie about getting a second chance. There probably isn't a Christian alive who hasn't at some time or another gotten the blues around the birthday of Jesus. How much do you suppose your father identified with that sense of depression when he wrote the story? And how much did you identify with it when you were making the movie?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think we personally identify with depression. Our family hasn't really struggled with that. And Christmas is our favorite time of year. Our favorite movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, my dad and mine. So I think what we identify with, or at least we resonate with, is the concept of contrast. And I think you see that in The Chosen. I think you'll see that actually in most of my movies, even though they all look different. The concept of here's a setting in which you would expect all of the people to think the same way, or here's a setting in which you would expect happiness. And then I love the concept of the main character being contrasted with everyone else, whether they know it or not. So Midnight Clear is about the setting of it's Christmas. This is a wonderful time of year. Everyone's happy except for our main characters. I just think that's interesting because I think it speaks to the growth that they're going to have to experience throughout the story. And that's true in It's a Wonderful Life, which is probably the most influential movie in my life, other than One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the Jack Nicholson movie, which again is about a guy who's in a setting in which he happens to be what he believes is the sane one in a group of insane people, whereas Midnight Clear maybe is the opposite. But he's an outsider, and I love outsider stories. That's what The Chosen is. And so I think, again, I don't maybe identify with the outsider because for the most part, haven't been a lonely person in my life, but I love exploring the notion of what it must be like for someone to come into a world in which they are uncomfortable or a setting that doesn't match up with how they feel. And so I think that's what Midnight Clear was attempting to explore.
I want to talk about screenwriting because that's what I want to do when I grow up. You have Tyler Thompson and Ryan Swan. Come on. These
Ryan Swanson,
are crazy. I'm sorry, did I pronounce his name wrong?
I think you might have said Ryan Swan. Did you say Swan or Swanson?
Is it Swanson?
Yes.
Ryan Swanson. I'll get it right second time.
Yes.
So what I wanted to ask you about is, again, in a production sense, is your process of collaboration. I mean, one of the things you did, I know you guys went away, you rented a cabin somewhere, so you could kind of really find the storyline and stuff. I'm interested in this as, trying to get better at this craft, but I think the fans would be interested because these two guys, and you as well, because I know you're in the mix of the writing as well. This is some of the best faith-based writing I've ever seen because you guys play true. Mm-hmm. You don't pull any punches, and the characters are real. They seem real struggles, real people, And so I just was wondering, do you have a methodology for collaboration that you follow, or is each project different? Is each season going to be different? Because it sure seems like you're really in tune with that, that magical moment of taking a script and translating it into film, telling a story in images. And so I just think that is something that I'm fascinated by. Yeah.
Well, I think the process of collaboration is different for everybody. So I wouldn't ever say, I can tell you briefly how we do it, but I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best way. I mean, there are people who write better by themselves. And some of the greatest screenwriters of all time are by themselves. There are also amazing screenwriters who are duos. The overwhelming majority of television shows that are successful have a writer's room of 7, 8, sometimes even more people. And each person is assigned a different episode. And there's no one way to do this. What Tyler, Ryan, and I happen to do is Tyler is not a traditional screenwriter. He wasn't trained as a screenwriter. He's got a spoken word background, poet background, playwright, does plays, but again, they're non-traditional. He's just a great writer and thinker and historian. And I'm not a trained screenwriter either. I'm a rewriter. So what I've done on all my projects is I have a very specific voice. I have a very specific rhythm. But I'm not a guy who could, I don't believe, write a movie from scratch, blank page. I know you guys have done that. That's not me. Ryan is the adult in the room. Ryan is the one who was on the rise as a screenwriter in Hollywood. Was working with Akiva Goldsman and I'm blanking on his name, but another great screenwriter. He was on his way up the chain, and then he kind of flamed out. And this is public. I mean, he's talked about this, but had major alcoholism struggles, and kind of fell out of the business. Got sober, and then I got reunited with him because he was my wife's high school Sadie Hawkins date, and so she reintroduced us a couple years ago. But he's extraordinary with plot, and he's the professional screenwriter. Mm. I happen to be pretty good with character and humor and emotion and stuff like that. So, and Tyler's extraordinary with, again, understanding history, understanding settings, symbolism. He's just really good with kind of big ideas. So the three of us get together, come up with the storyline. We get up on a whiteboard. We start sketching things out together. I mean, that is 33%, 33%, 33%. We're all contributing equally. Ryan, again, is the one with the least amount of biblical background. So he's kind of the keeper of the good. It needs to be a good story. It can't just be verse by verse recounting. So he's the one who, when we say, well, we need this story here and we need to be faithful to the scriptures here. And he's like, well, that's great for the scriptures, not necessarily great for a TV show. So how do we adjust the setting or the backstory to accommodate it so it makes for good television? And then we keep him in line when it comes to scriptural faithfulness. So then Tyler writes the Ryan writes an outline just to make sure we're on the same page. Then Tyler writes the first draft of the script. Over time, he has gotten increasingly more of a screenwriter. So it used to just be like a scriptment, like 30 pages of dialogue mixed with paragraphs, mixed with random things he'd throw in there. Now it actually looks more like a screenplay, but it's still not shootable. And he would say that. Sometimes it'll just say, then we get to the scene where Dallas makes people cry, or then we get to the scene where Brian, makes the plot work, Then Ryan does a shooting draft that is still not quite ready, but it looks like it could be. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's professionally done. And then they give it to me, and I put my stamp on it. So that's our process, and it happens. It's the same every time. We've thought about how much easier our lives would be if we added another writer. It just hasn't worked. We just can't think of it working any other way. So that's the process. What's funny about your question is I was just saying this the other day to someone, almost every time anyone asks about the writing, they always use the word real. It feels real. It feels like they're human beings. And it's just kind of funny that that's considered unique. Because I'm like, well, isn't that the point? I don't know. I didn't know that was so revolutionary. But when it comes to the Bible space, especially, I mean, I've read even some of the projects you guys have done. I mean, I think both of you are very good writers, and I've seen some of your work, and they feel like human beings. So I don't think it's not totally unique, but it's more unique than it should be. And it's very unique when it comes to Bible projects. That's the weird thing. Whenever you watch a Bible movie, they feel so much, not whenever, sometimes they feel like stained glass windows or formal presentations of characters. And I think we benefit from the fact that the very fact that our characters feel like human beings and talk like human beings gives us this unique, like, whoa, that is so rare. I think we get bonus points that we maybe don't deserve. That helps people like the show even more, just because it's so unique in this genre.
Okay. Now, because you're also the director, how much leeway do you give the actors with the script, or none at all?
I give the actors leeway in the sense that they have the freedom to come to me before we film, and even on the day, to say, this isn't working for me, or I don't get it, or whatever. And every actor is different. Like using like Eric Avari as an example, who played Nicodemus. He was only in season 1, but I knew every time he was going to come to me sometime beforehand and go, we need to sit down and talk. And we would go through every scene, and he was very detailed about the lines that didn't roll off the tongue, or he's just very, very thoughtful about that kind of stuff. And other people are thoughtful as well, but maybe not quite as nuanced or in the details as he is. And then other actors never say a word. They deliver the lines on the page, and they find their own way to make them work. So there's leeway there, but oftentimes, I don't know. I think by the time it gets to the actors, our show has just such a specific voice, and increasingly that voice is in partnership with the people we've cast in these roles. So, I mean, there's become less and less things that they say to us because now, like in the first 4 episodes, we hadn't cast anyone yet. Well, now that we have Paras Patel as Matthew, you realize, oh, the less is more with him. His face tells you so many things that and the character is such a certain way. We don't need to say as many things as we thought we did. And so there's less and less feedback from them, because I think we're writing with their voice in mind as well. On the set, sometimes they like to throw things out, meaning they not throw out the words, but say something different. Some of the actors are more ad-libby than others. The actor who plays Thomas, Joey Vahidi, is a more improvisational actor. He'll just do little funny things or add little things here and there. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And we play, we like to play. But the show has such a specific voice and rhythm that there's not a lot of that, even though I let them do it if it comes to mind. But I don't know, there's so many characters in the scenes that if one character decided to start going off on a tangent, it would kind of knock over the dominoes. And so for the most part, we talk about a lot of things, but there's not a ton of changes that are made just because I think we're really so much in sync already.
I want to talk about music for a second. I want to ask you about music. This is kind of a directed question to you, almost on a personal level, but the music in The Chosen is haunting. It is so connected with the narrative structure. It works so well. This seems kind of like a little bozo of a question, but I'm just interested. I mean, is there a song or a part of the score or a moment, in filming where a song just absolutely resonated to you, where you're like, done deal?
Do you mean what in the score that they like when they submitted
any music in production that just clicked? Now, I know that all does, but just a moment where music just absolutely worked.
Yeah, well, during production, we're not thinking too much about music yet, although now that I know Dan and Matt so well and we work so well together, sometimes I have in my head like, I know what they're going to do with this. And sometimes there's a montage that we're filming. So where I know, for example, the beginning and end of episode 4 of season 2 are both dialogue deficient and music heavy. The first 10 minutes of episode 4 of season 2 has no dialogue. And then the last, 5 minutes maybe, or, most of the last 5-6 minutes of the episode don't have any dialogue. So I'm talking to them in advance and I'm saying, hey, just a heads up, there's going to be no dialogue. It's going to be very music driven. And on the set, I maybe have a little bit in my ear. But it's in post when I give them the rough cuts, they watch it through. I don't want to know yet. I don't want to tell them too much of what I'm thinking because I want them to surprise me because they're so brilliant. We have an overall palette that we have agreed on, which it's kind of slave spiritual mixed with Middle Eastern drone, mixed with whatever comes to mind, kind of raw instruments. Want it to feel very organic, very raw, very Southern gospel, Delta bluesy at times. So we know that, but I really like to be surprised as to what they're thinking. And it happens, like I remember specifically episode 4 of season 1, the Miracle of the Fish. I assumed the music was going to be kind of traditional, moving, swelling. I like things to build to this kind of beautiful climax of raw emotion. And Dan Hasseltine had this idea for like a more Irish jig, kind of upbeat kind of vibe. And I remember he mentioned that to Matt, his co-composer, and Matt was like, all right, let's chase it. And which is one of my favorite words I've ever heard about the art process is let's chase it. This notion that there's something there that's brilliant, but we haven't found it. Let's go find it. I love that phrase. And he's like, let's chase it. And they chased it. And I remember the first time I heard it, Jesus kind of snarky with Simon, and all of a sudden the boat tips and this music comes in, and then it builds, boom, and it goes to the next level, and more drums come in. And I was sitting there listening to the first time, and I was crying and cheering at the same time. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so fun. And I never would have thought of a joyous approach to that scene. I would have thought of more of a, like you said, haunting beauty. And I remember, I'll never forget that moment of just like, whoa, I never would have expected that. I think it created a scene that is so unique in this genre that I'm so proud of it. And it was because it involved so many things, like the special effects, like the actors, like the music, that I didn't predict going into it.
That's an awesome answer. Thank you. I should have said post, because how are you doing it as you're filming? You're not going to have music flowing.
And you know that.
But that answer to me is kind of what I was looking. I wanted something that, that's deep. Thanks, Dallas. It's awesome.
Of course.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Dan and Matt. And
that was brilliant, by the way. The three of you guys, you were total, like the level of nerddom in that conversation was overwhelming. I'm like, I don't know how popular this interview will be, but the music nerds are going to love it.
Well, I think I mentioned to them that when I was hearing the music, I was hearing a lot of Lisa Gerrard, who was on the Gladiator soundtrack, and Ofra Haza and Dead Can Dance. And they all acknowledged that they were influences. So when I hear that music, the Gladiator is like only one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. Yes. And what they're doing with The Chosen is very similar to that. So, but they talked a bit about if the fans want to go back and look at that interview, they do talk quite a bit about the process of writing the music. So yeah. I guess I'm up here now. Dallas, let's climb in the Wayback Machine again. In 2010, you made a movie called What If, starring Kevin Sorbo and one of my all-time favorites, John Ratzenberger. He's best known for his work on Cheers, unless you're not my age, and you're likely not my age, but also on his voiceover work that he's done with Pixar Studios. And I might point out that Stelio Savante, who played Moses in season 1, has a small role in What If. I guess What If could be described as a mashup between Groundhog Day and It's a Wonderful Life, which has obviously been a big influence in your life. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, with Family Man as an obvious one as well. Family Man is Nicolas Cage, where he gets literally an alternate view. And in fact, it was PureFlix's idea to do that storyline, and they had actually commissioned a script. And when we became friends and started talking about maybe working together on something, they mentioned this, and I thought, oh, It's a Wonderful Life and Family Man. I love both of those movies. I always felt that Family Man was almost great. So the idea of taking that concept and tweaking it a bit, I was excited about. And then yes, Groundhog Day, amazing movie. It's a Wonderful Life, amazing movie. And then Family Man had some influences on it as well. But yeah, again, the notion of an outsider, again, a guy who's now thrust into a situation where, he gets a chance to see what his life could have looked like had he actually followed what he was supposed to do instead of what he didn't do, which is a reverse It's a Wonderful Life. Again, outsider. He has to pretend to be a pastor when he doesn't even know the Bible. How does he do that? That was the approach, the concept of What If.
Well, you mentioned the PureFlix connection, and of course, I've worked for them for 16 years, and DJ is now a veteran of PureFlix. And I'm told by a very reliable source that What If is one of the more popular movies on the PureFlix streaming platform. It's also still available on DVD if you're real fast.
Fantastic movie.
You want to get that. I highly recommend it. You've hinted at it, but can you talk more about how the film came together? It sounds to me like they came to you with the script, but how were you able to pull together such a great cast?
Yeah, so they came to me with a script that had originally been written by a woman by the name of Andrea Nasfeld, who I've actually worked with. Again, I worked with her on Resurrection of Gavin Stone.
Yeah, you have worked with Andrea quite a bit.
Yeah, and it was a good script. It was not quite the story that I was passionate about. So this isn't anything negative towards her. She did a lovely job. It just wasn't, the story itself wasn't quite something I was passionate about. And they had some similar thoughts. And then they brought on Carrie Solomon and Chuck Konzelman, who have also done some very successful movies since then. And What If was actually the first faith-based movie that they wrote. And here's what's really interesting about this. They had been successful screenwriters in the Hollywood business and hadn't done anything faith-based. And someone walked up to them and said, "God told me to tell you you're going to do Christian movies." And they were like, "No way." And then another person independently came up and said the same thing. "God told me to tell you," or "I had a dream last night," or something like that. It was like really crazy. Like he wants you to do movies for him, and Christian movies. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, no way." So they started looking for movies in the Christian space. And the first one that they watched was Midnight Clear, the movie that I made that you referenced earlier. And they loved that movie and said that movie convinced them that they could do faith-based movies and not have them be a formula that fit whatever everything else that they were scared of. So it's kind of this cool thing. And so we really clicked really well. And they wrote then a kind of a new approach to the story. And then I came in and did my own thing like I normally do, like just tweaking the characters and some of the stuff. And I think the script just really turned out really great. Like it's better than it deserves to be for the budget that we had. I mean, the budget of that movie was like, I mean, you guys have done PureFlix movies, they're really low.
Yeah, about $13 would be my guess.
Yeah, we had double that. We had double that amount on this one. So,
okay.
Yeah. But yeah. So low budget, and but right around that time, I mean, this script was just really tight. It just really worked. And I still, when I watch that movie now, I'm just very proud of it. Obviously, I don't take credit for all of it, but I think the movie knows what it is. It's very, it doesn't try to be a bigger movie than it is. And the performances are all really strong. So I just met Kevin.
Well said.
I just met Kevin Sorbo at a party, and we clicked and became good friends. And I was casting for the movie, and he goes, "Well, why don't you send it to me? Let me take a look at it. I'm looking for fun stuff." And he read it and loved it. And he was like, "Well, why not? Why can't I do this movie?" I'm like, "I don't know. Maybe you should." And I didn't know if he could do it because I'd just known him from Hercules. And I watched a pilot of a film of a show that he had done, and he was funny and casual, and I just thought, yeah, he'd be great. And then all the other roles just kind of came together. People just really liked the script. John Ratzenberger, who I thought would make a good angel, because the story is an angel who gives Kevin Sorbo's character a chance to live an alternative life for 2 weeks to see what he's missing out on. And John, I met him at a party, and I said, I have a script that I think you'd be really good for. And I said, it's a part of an angel. And he goes, "Oh, well, does the angel get to fight?" Which is a really weird thing to ask. And I go, "Actually, he punches out Kevin Sorbo twice. And he goes, "Well, I have to do it." And I go, "Why?" And he said, "I just last week he had a dream about the archangel Gabriel, Michael the archangel, and he had this passion in his head of like, I really would love to see an angel who could kick some butt, and because I think we always think of angels as this like kind of flowery harp playing thing, and he had just the week before had that kind of in a dream or something." And so I sent him the script, and he loved it and wept. And so yeah, the cat and Debbie Ryan, who became a huge Disney star, was someone who I had happened to know because she was an extra in Midnight Clear. So we filmed Midnight Clear in Texas. Debbie Ryan and her mother were extras. And her mom followed up and found me online and emailed me and said, "I really appreciate how well you treated us, and it was really sweet. Do you have any career advice? Because Debbie's trying to get into this business." And so I gave her a couple of thoughts. And then she reached out a year later and said, "Hey, Debbie just got cast in this Disney Channel show. So, any more advice?" And it turns out she's Debbie Ryan. She had a different last name than her stage name. And so again, be nice to extras, because then when it came time to cast, we got this really cool, again, a cast that was way better than the budget we had and the size of the movie. And that movie has been out now for 12 years and continues to make money and get views. And you were right. It's apparently one of the top movies on the PureFlix streaming service. And there's even been discussions of a sequel now and a television show based on it. Love that movie. And that movie came as a result of God telling me, again, I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but I remember I was looking for another movie to do. And I didn't want to do Christian movies. I only wanted to do movies that had a little bit of faith in them. And I was mowing the lawn, and God just like a sledgehammer put it on my heart. "I want you to do movies for my people." And I was like, "Yeah, but Christian movies aren't any good." And he said, "Well, then make a good one." And I was like, "Oh," he's like, "My people deserve good movies too." And so I that's when I started talking to PureFlix, because they reached out at the same time, and they did explicitly Christian movies. Like PureFlix isn't even, it's one of the things I like about PureFlix. They're not trying to be anything else. Like, we are making movies for this particular audience. And I thought, all right, I'm going to go for it. And I'm just going to try to make the best version of that I can. And that became What If.
Well, folks, I highly recommend it. Whether you stream it or you buy the DVD, it is a very charming movie.
That's a good word for it. It's very charming. I think that's accurate. Thank you.
I want to get in the Wayback Machine and talk to you about a movie you made in 2017 called The Resurrection of Gavin Stone. And if the quote is correct, you said that it was your biggest career failure. And it actually, the secular media was actually pretty kind to it. And I think it's a very funny movie about a former child star who pretends to be a Christian in order to land the role of Jesus in an Easter play. And again, it's another one of your stories about second chances. So I'm wondering, why did you consider it a failure?
Well, from a career perspective, by definition, it was a failure because it lost a lot of money and cost me a future in that had been lined up for me in many ways. Some of the biggest producers in Hollywood were part of that movie. I mean, Blumhouse Productions, which is Jason Blum's company. They're known primarily, of course, for horror films. Almost every successful horror film in the last 10 years was produced by Blumhouse, and they were interested in faith-based movies, believe it or not. And Walden Media was involved, and WWE, the wrestling company, had a film division that was very successful. Universal Studios got involved as a studio, and they loved they wanted to do faith-based films. A mutual friend connected us based on a short film I had done for my church, and they really loved that. I had come across this script that Andrea had written that I really loved. Again, wasn't quite the storyline perfectly that I wanted to tell, so I worked with her on tweaking it and making some adjustments, and then I sent, when they said, we want to do movies with you, what do you got? I sent them that script. They really liked it, and then when I made the movie, they loved it too, and it tested through the roof. I mean, it was just when they were doing it for some test audiences, it was higher than most of the movies they'd done, and then it came out and it bombed. And all the movies that they were planning to do with me after that, they were like, let's do 5 movies over the next 10 years. And we're going to plant a flag in the faith space that currently isn't being served by movies that are of a certain genre. And it was the opportunity to do a dramedy, which is, again, as you guys know very well, we've done a lot of work with PureFlix. Comedies are a tough sell. What If isn't a straight comedy. It's more of a dramedy, but that's one of the very few that fit into that genre where there's a lot of laughs that actually was successful. Just a hard nut to crack. And they just really wanted to do different things in this space. And I was set up, and then the movie bombed. And that day that the first day of the box office, I knew it was over. And I went from a director with a very bright future to a director with no future. So that's why it would be considered a career failure. I'm proud of the movie. Again, I think in terms of the look of it, which isn't anyone in particular's fault. Some of it was you get free locations, like the church that I was at, and it's a great location for a church, but it doesn't have the kind of texture and depth that you'd love for a movie. So the cinematography, production design isn't quite what I think would be worth a theatrical release. I think that was one of the things that was a problem, is the movie was trying to be, at least in the release strategy, bigger and something different than what it should have been. Probably should have just been a Netflix movie, but I'm proud of the film. I think I would call it a very good Hallmark film. Like, I think it's like one of the best Hallmark films I've seen, at the risk of sounding arrogant. But again, I think the movie works. I'm very proud of it. I think it's very funny. I think it's got a really good message. I think it's heartwarming, but visually it's not, again, I'm not blaming anyone in particular. It's just not quite what it should be. And it certainly didn't belong in theaters. So that's why it's a failure, because again, it lost money and cost me my future. Now, that said, I'm so glad that happened, because if it would have succeeded, I would not be doing The Chosen. We would not be having this conversation. So yeah, I'm still proud of the movie. It's kind of having a second life on Netflix. Like, it came on Netflix, and I'm still here all the time. Like, Chosen fans are like, I just saw Resurrection of Gavin Stone. I loved it. I don't know why it failed, but I'm sure glad it did, because it gave us The Chosen. But I loved it. So it's kind of having a little bit of a rebirth on Netflix right now.
There was an indie movie that came out, a really cheap indie movie. It came out about the same time. Maybe it was on your radar screen. Maybe it wasn't. It was called Mangus. And it was a story about a teenager back in the 1970s, and he wanted to play the role of Jesus in Jesus Christ Superstar. And then he was involved in a car accident and was paralyzed and ended up in a wheelchair. And the struggle in the movie was to try and figure out whether or not they could cast a Jesus in a wheelchair. And it was a really interesting and funny little movie. It probably didn't do anywhere near as well as the Resurrection of Gavin Stone, but it looked like you guys were mining the same territory. If you ever get a chance to see it, you should see it. It's
a good,
interesting.
I've heard that title. I didn't know that's what the movie was about. It's really interesting.
And just so I can plug my own hometown here, Baltimore's own John Waters plays Jesus Christ in the movie, who appears to the kid and tells him to go ahead. It's okay to play Jesus in a wheelchair. So
I wonder that might explain why it didn't do as well as John Waters as Jesus.
Yeah, well, thank God Divine was already gone, but that's a whole other story. Not that I have an axe to grind, but I really do have an axe to grind, and you've sort of touched on it already. Christian and movies and faith-based entertainment are frequently referred to as cheesy, outdated, heavy, embarrassing, not quite as good, on and on and on and on. And I frankly don't agree with that, and not just because I have skin in that game. I can't possibly understand how even the most cynical viewer could watch an episode of The Chosen and not be impressed with the professionalism. And I could say that really about all of your films. How do you respond to that type of criticism? I hope you don't buy into it, but does it affect you?
It doesn't affect me. I will say this. I would agree with you that the criticism that Christian films tend to be cheesy or overly sentimental or falsely sentimental. The reason I push back on it is not that I disagree that many Christian films are that way. It's that that's true of all genres of film. I mean, the number of good films compared to the number of bad films is extraordinarily small. I mean, you go to any film festival, and I've been to many, many film festivals, and I'm sure you have as well. Most of the films aren't very good. And it's just true. It's extraordinarily hard. And I'm not even saying that as a criticism. I've made some not good films. It's just really, really hard to make a good film. Anything could go wrong. But if you turn on the Hallmark Channel, and which is extraordinarily successful, I don't think you can come away thinking that those movies aren't cheesy. At least most of them aren't cheesy, and some of them just. But they serve a particular audience, and that's okay. And who defines what cheesy is anyway? Sometimes you want cheesy. You want something. You want an escape. You don't want it to be totally realistic and raw, because you're not. You experience that in real life. You're looking to TV for something different. So I'm not nearly as critical of even the faith space as some people are, especially because every genre of film has its, stories and movies that just aren't great. All that to say, I do believe that The Chosen, like I said before, does get extra points because we don't follow the rules that I think you guys have done, who've done PureFlix films. And this isn't just for PureFlix, this is for a lot of Christian companies. To appeal to a specific audience, you do have to follow certain rules. And these are the rules that Hallmark Channel has to follow for their audience, and action movies have to follow for their audience, and even adult films, at the risk of sounding crass, there's certain rules, that we won't talk about here on the live, but you have certain scenes you need to do. You have certain things you need to not do. In an adult film, you don't want to have too much story. But I remember when I actually did a Hallmark movie. I didn't make it myself, but I got it set up, and the producer was like, 80% of the movie has to have music. Just things like that. So all that to say, The Chosen, we don't have any rules. We're solely focused on what's absolute, works for the story and what's going to capture the intentions of this show, which are to capture put you there in first century Galilee and make you feel it and smell it and feel the oppression and the rawness of it. And in episode 1, we were really trying to accurately tell the story of Mary Magdalene who had been possessed by demons. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to make it safe. We're not going to make it family friendly. And we've had no rules. And so I do think we've benefited from that being compared to other projects that do have rules. But that doesn't mean that The Chosen is better. It doesn't mean that the industry as itself has finally been. I mean, sometimes hear that about The Chosen, like, oh, this will change the industry. No, we just have different rules than some of the other films do, and they're not wrong. Ours aren't any more right or wrong. In fact, some people are offended by The Chosen because it's too raw, or it doesn't follow. It's not a verse by verse retelling of the Jesus story. So everything has its audience that won't appreciate it, and artsy fartsy people who, don't like Hallmark stuff or Pure Flick stuff aren't any more right than the Hallmark audience who doesn't like the raw artsy fartsy stuff. People who love McDonald's aren't any more right or wrong than people who love Morton Steakhouse. We all have different priorities. So go ahead.
They just weigh more. No.
Yes.
No. Well, I never read. I make it a point never to read any of the reviews of anything I've worked on because I don't think I can learn anything from it. But some of the criticism that I've gotten, some of the worst criticism I've gotten came from the Christians, not from the secular audience. You've sort of hinted. Have you been down that road a few times before?
Oh, I would say 98.7% of the criticism that The Chosen has gotten has been from Christians. Partially because the secular audience, by and large, doesn't know about The Chosen and isn't watching it, and a lot of them wouldn't watch it. We've found what's interesting is the secular crowd who has watched it, like maybe their friend pushed it on them or whatever, has been overwhelmingly positive, and interestingly enough, has fewer confusions in the first episode. This is not what your question was, but it's really interesting, is the first episode of The Chosen, especially initially, confused a lot of Christians because they were expecting a Jesus show and they were expecting it to fit into the traditional genre of a Jesus show. So the first 10 minutes, even, they're going, who are these people? What Bible verse is this from? I don't recognize this storyline. The opening credits sequence is really weird. It's the music is super it's like rootsy American gospel meets slave spiritual meets Delta blues. That doesn't feel like a Jesus show. The opening credit sequence with the fish and the kind of Saul Bass, inspired graphics. So this is so unique and different. And they're like, where are we? Who are these people? And they weren't watching it like they would a normal TV show. Non-Christians who don't know the story as well were watching it like normal. Like, well, I don't expect to know who these people are yet because I haven't watched the show before. And every pilot of every show I've ever watched takes me time to figure out who's who and what's what. So it's been really interesting to see non-Christians actually have a very different set of expectations and tend to be more forgiving in the first episode or two than Christians are because they just don't have those expectations. But to be fair, I'm sure if the show was more famous and ended up debuting on NBC on Wednesday night at 8:00, we would get our fair share of critics who are non-Christian as well. But boy, Christians, they are really happy to declare exactly why we're wrong to do something and why they have figured out and settled the 2,000 years of debates about what's appropriate for the portrayal of Jesus. And in one YouTube comment, they can settle that debate and point out exactly where I've gone wrong.
It all goes into the trash heap. So
sometimes,
yeah,
yes.
Dallas, I think we tormented you long enough. I'm sorry if this ended up being another geeky interview, but I think you understand that DJ and I approach this from a slightly different perspective, not as fanboys, but hopefully I'm not being arrogant by saying as colleagues. I'll say it. I've loved this conversation. So not at all. I requested it. I wanted to talk to you guys again. I love the other hosts on Against Tide Media as well, but you guys are kind of the original ones. And I thought it would be a little interesting because I've done so many interviews from people who haven't done, what you've done. So, I've appreciated your work, not only on this channel, but also your other jobs. I feel like you've always tried to
come at your work from a unique perspective and not just paint by numbers. Even though I know that the genre that you're in oftentimes wants you to do that, but you've found ways to be interesting, and I think that's really cool. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the questions. Again, they clearly good questions because I couldn't stop talking when you'd ask them. So I apologize for dragging on a little bit too long.
Hey, Dallas, thank you so much. It was so great to meet you face to face. Well, whatever this is.
I suspect that you and I met years ago on the set of a PureFlix movie. I can't remember because I only met hundreds of people back then. But I remember David A.R. White and Michael Scott saying to me something along the lines of, you're going to have to keep an eye on that guy because, he's going to be somebody.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Interesting. That's possible.
Would you ever be tempted to go back to a feature film? I know The Chosen is probably going to be your calling and your ministry for the rest of your life, but would you ever be tempted to do another feature?
Oh, I'm planning on it actually in the near future. I can't say too much about it, but there's a dream.
And I know a little bit about it, and I can't talk about it either. But nevertheless, I was just wondering whether
I know nothing
this is something. This is something you would do as a diversion because you really enjoy doing it, or would it have to be really good to pull you away from The Chosen?
Well, nothing's going to pull me away from The Chosen, but in between seasons, there's a project that I've wanted for 15 years that it's very passionate, that I'm very passionate about, and I finally got the rights to it, and so I plan on doing that. Hopefully, if everything works out in the next year or so, in between seasons, and then there's as I mentioned earlier, there's been talk of a what if sequel that I wouldn't direct myself, but and we've talked about the potential show, and but there's the conversations have been had, and we'll see what happens.
Loose lips sink ships.
Sorry about that.
Dallas, thanks for putting up with us.
You know what? To be perfectly honest with you, I spoke to David Arroway. He's in South Africa right now making a streaming series. And when I told him that there was a possibility I would be talking to you, he was like, "Oh, I'm so glad that you guys have finally hooked up." And I said, "Yeah, Dave, thanks so much for the intro. I really appreciate your introducing me to Dallas so many years ago." But he did talk about some of what you mentioned, and they are excited about it as well. So we need to pray and see what will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. Really great talking to you, and we'll do it again in a few years. Maybe when The Chosen starts to wrap up, maybe season 7, we'll kind of do a retrospective and
this
bring
is
it
a
all
lot of fun. A lot of fun, Dallas. Thank you.
Great.
So I guess we'll just say, Against Tide Media fans, what a great time we had today, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And we're out. I live in Baltimore, so if you hear gunshots in the background, that's not a special effect. That's for real.
Yes, I watched The Wire. I'm aware of how that works. So.
I knew you were going to say that. And unfortunately, my experience has been anywhere I've gone in the world, the only thing they know about Baltimore is The Wire. Yeah. But I want to be the first to tell you that was a reality show, not a drama. Okay. Yeah. Those things actually happened.
Yes, I'm aware.
It was nice that you made sure I was recording because that's kind of important.
Yes.
Don't want to have a Nick Shakur repeat.
Yes.
Dallas, just for the record, we did give you the opportunity to have a lawyer present while we were questioning you, but you waived that right. So what you've gotten yourself into is pretty much your own predicament. So
yes, and you guys offered to talk to me beforehand about what you wanted to ask, and I said, no, let's just have fun with it and see what happens.
Well,
so
be careful what you ask for, because
I love it.
Dallas, this is going to be a joke question, which I'm sure Noah's not going to put in there. What are you going to do when Jonathan Rumi gets to be 70 years old? Is he still going to play Jesus, or what? What are you? No, I'm not expecting a real answer to that.
Well, Jonathan. I know, obviously, you're joking, but even if Jonathan was 70, I'd find a way to make it work because the guy is extraordinary. So,
and he's a good enough actor that I think he could make it work.
Yes.
Make sure that I actually save it, or Noah will kill me.